So this evening you will be talking about your career as a science writer who has written 5 bestsellers over the last 20 years on very different topics. Perhaps you can tell us how you came to choose these particular topics. For example, your first book was about Fermat/theorem.
Often people come to me and ask advice. How do you write a science book? What are the skills of writing? And I think the greatest skill in writing is finding something to write about. If you find a good story, then the writing becomes very easy. And so when I came across the story of Fermat's last theorem, it's just a staggeringly amazing story. And so there was no question that I had to do something about it. First I made a film about it for the BBC, and then I wrote a book about it. And the reason why it's such a remarkable story is you have a problem that is 350 years old. And 350 years ago, somebody said they could prove this problem, they could solve this problem, but they never wrote down the proof. And then they died. So there is this tantalizing note, this marginal note, that says this problem can be solved, but no solution. And then you have 10 years, 100 years, 300 years of effort by mathematicians from all over the world trying to solve this problem. And then you have an English mathematician. I say mathematician, he was 10 years old. He was a little boy. And he dreamed of solving this problem. And he worked on it when he was a little boy. He worked on it when he was at school. He worked on it when he went to university. He worked on it when he was doing his PhD. He worked on it as he was a young professor. And then eventually, at the age of 40, after working in secrecy for 7 years, he proved Fermat's last theorem. And so you have a story of childhood ambition, of adult obsession, of a 350-year-old mystery, which itself has its roots in Greek mathematics, as I suppose all mathematics does. So for a writer, this is an irresistible story. And so it was very easy when this story appeared. Even though nobody had written a book about mathematics in this way before, I knew that it would be something that the public would find exciting and interesting.
Okay, so after this, you wrote the code book.
So in Fermat's last theorem, there was a chapter about Alan Turing. Alan Turing was a great British mathematician, laid down some of the foundations of mathematics. He laid down some of the fundamentals of computer theory, of computer science. He worked on the patterns of animals, on their skin, their animal patterns and stripes and spots. And he also broke the German Enigma code in the Second World War and thereby changed the course of history. And when I was including him in Fermat's last theorem, his section became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I suddenly realized that this is not a book about Alan Turing. It's not a book about code breaking. It's a book about Fermat's last theorem. So I cut it right down. But I then took all of that cryptography material and decided to put it into another book about codes and code breaking. What I loved about the idea of codes is that it's an ancient idea. It goes all the way back again to the ancient Greeks and the Sumerians and the Egyptians who also had codes. And it comes right up to the modern day, the internet. Today, codes are more important than ever before. We live in the information age. The way you protect information is by encoding it. And so we have a subject with a great history, with great stories of warfare and secret diaries and so on. And Alan Turing, of course, and the Enigma in the Second World War. So again, to me, this was an irresistible idea of great stories, interesting science, and more relevant today than ever before.
Then we have Big Bang, dealing with the theory of the universe.
So I remember going to America, possibly to talk about the code book. And I was sat next to somebody, and he said, "Oh, you're a physicist. By training, you're a physicist. Tell me about the Big Bang Theory." And I said, "You don't know much about it?" And he didn't. And it made me realize that we live in a generation. When I was born, the Big Bang Theory wasn't accepted. And now it is the foundation of cosmology. The Big Bang Theory explains the origin of our universe and the evolution of our universe. There are big questions, but it's a big idea. And so I thought it was very odd that somebody wouldn't know something about the Big Bang Theory. And I thought we're privileged to be alive at this time when the Big Bang Theory has emerged. And therefore we have a responsibility, I think, as humans, to have an understanding of this theory. So the idea of the book was born on that plane to explain what is the Big Bang Theory, who came up with the idea, and why do we think it's true. You know, it's the biggest idea in science. And I wrote the book proposal. And when I landed, I got to my hotel room that night, I faxed it back to my agent, and within 24 hours, we said, that's it. We had a publisher and everything. It was just, to me, it's the most amazing story in the world.
So how about your fourth book, Trick or Treatment?
Okay, so Trick or Treatment is a very different book because it's about alternative medicine. It's about homeopathy and acupuncture and Reiki and chiropractic and all of these strange traditional healing methods. And I'm not a medic. I'm a physicist by training. So why did I write this book? Well, I wanted to write this book because I saw some very strange claims being made by homeopaths and acupuncturists and chiropractors and herbalists. Strange claims and dangerous claims. And so I worked with a professor of complementary medicine. In fact, he was the world's first professor of complementary medicine, Edzard Ernst. And we worked on this book together. And the idea was to look at all of the therapies and to look at lots of different conditions and simply say, what does the evidence tell us? And in some cases, the alternative therapies work. In many cases, they don't work. And in some cases, they're even dangerous. So it was a book written because I think it's great to celebrate good science, but it's also important to challenge pseudoscience. And so that book was written because we felt we had a responsibility to tell the truth about some of this quackery that is being sold to us.
About the Simpsons, their mathematical secrets in your last book.
Okay, so the Simpsons is the world's most popular TV show. It's also the most mathematical TV show in history. There is more maths in The Simpsons than you can possibly imagine. And this is because a lot of the writers are mathematicians. They have degrees in maths, they have PhDs in maths, one was even a professor at Yale. So they're not mathematicians now, they're comedy writers, but they still love mathematics. And so whenever they can, they squeeze a little equation or some special number into the background of the show. And so I went through all the shows, I looked at loads of episodes, and documented all the examples and interviewed all of the writers. And for me, this was a really good way to introduce people to mathematics who might be a bit scared. Because in this book, you have Homer Simpson and Bart Simpson and Lisa Simpson in particular, I suppose, holding your hand as you learn some of this mathematics. And again, you know, you always are looking for good ideas for a book. And The Simpsons and Mathematics is an incredible idea because who would ever have thought that there is mathematics in The Simpsons? And I love The Simpsons and I love mathematics, so for me, it was a wonderful book to write.
Lastly, could you please share with us a few words about what you're working on currently?
Yeah, so I've stopped writing. I'm not writing at the moment. I don't have any plans to write. And instead, I'm working on education in schools. I think the books help inspire children. That's great. Inspiration is important. But if children are inspired, then we need to then help them become good and help them become excellent. And so what I'm really interested now is to help more children become excellent at maths. Because I think in England, I don't know the situation here, but in England, if you're good at maths, people say, well, that's fine, you can stop. Whereas I want to say, if you're good at maths, you now need to be great. You need to challenge yourself. If you find maths easy, you should find maths hard, because that's where the interesting maths is. So that's what I do at the moment, is trying to help the next generation of young people become real mathematicians. And when I say real mathematicians, I mean physicists and engineers and computer scientists, because they all have their foundations in that kind of mathematical thinking that is so special.